Hello and welcome to the Gnostic Warrior radio show and podcast, broadcasting from GnosticWarrior.com in San Diego, California, to around the world. I'm your host, Mo, and today on the show we have Dr. Mark Davis. He is the author of Obamacare, Dead on Arrival, A Prescription for Disaster. He has other books called Demons of Democracy and also Millennium Diet, The Practice Guide for Weight Loss. Dr. Mark Davis is real knowledgeable on health. He's a former doctor, and he's going to get us educated on Obamacare and what that means to us here in the U.S. So if you don't know what's coming down the pike, you better listen to this podcast. But before we get into this great show, here's a quick word from our sponsor. Hello, listeners around the world. Would you like to have your own website like I have? How about your own podcast? I've made over $1 million with my other websites, such as loansafe.org, and now you can too. But before you start, you have to have a nice website before you can take it to that next step. And now, for only $79, you can get a great website design at wecreatewebdesigns.com. Again, for only $79, you can get a great website at wecreatewebdesigns.com. Get your website today so you can start spreading light and truth tomorrow. How you doing today, Dr. Mark Davis, wherever you're at in the world?
I am doing very well. I'm a native of New York City. I am in northern Maryland right now, living for the last 3 decades. And where are you, sir? Where are you located?
I'm in San Diego, California, the county. I'm in a city called Carlsbad, right on the beach.
Yeah, I'm jealous.
Yeah, we're having some nice weather, but it was pretty cold this morning. How's the weather there today?
We have 11.5 inches of snow outside, according to my indicator, and it's freezing here. Freezing meaning 15 degrees Fahrenheit up to 20 degrees. That'll be our high today. And it's a very slippery road, and it's unusual for Maryland. So we're having global cooling, as I can see it.
So compared to Al Gore saying global warming, it's actually the opposite, right?
Yeah, well, Al Gore has a new tone now. He's going after global cooling now. The polar vortex. I don't think he knows what polar vortex. I mean, I'm a physician, but I'm a trained scientist prior to becoming a physician, and I hear this stuff from the EPA, from the government and stuff, and it just doesn't tick with the real world, what we have now. And it's global. It's certainly not global warming. It's climate change, but there's always climate change within thousands of years as you look back. So,
well, I think that goes along with, your new book and then everything else we citizens of whatever republic or government we're under. There's always going to be a form of propaganda being put out there by the media, the government as well, and those that don't get educated are always fooled by this propaganda. Do you agree?
Very much so. Propaganda is what the government puts out and only what they put out. And specifically for Obamacare, there are websites of information that are full of lies that the government has put out. And some programs, some media programs are actually using those websites as a basis for their shows. And the information being provided is just not true. And I would say one more thing before we start. People deserve better than what they're getting out of Obamacare. The whole country, no matter rich, poor, whatever, you will be affected by Obamacare in some way, shape, or form. So we'll get to it as we go through this process.
Definitely. And that's how I want to start this conversation out, Dr. Davis, would be you explaining to us exactly what Obamacare is in a nutshell in the most simplest fashion for us uneducated healthcare folks out there that don't really understand what is coming down to us with this Obamacare.
In approximately 2008 and a half, when the Congress turned Democrat, or they continued to be Democrat, they came up with an idea of a national health program based partly on Romneycare, which was instituted in 2007, January 1st, and partly on Hillary Care, which was being formulated on or about 1993. Over a 2-year period, they got together in caucuses, lawyers, battalions of lawyers, very little health personal input. There were some doctors involved with this, mainly written by attorneys. If you read it end to end, it's written in legalese. On March 23rd, 2010, Obamacare was passed by the slimmest of margins in the House and through a process called reconciliation in the Senate, where they were able to use 51 votes to get it passed there. So very few people really wanted this. And the people that voted it passed and are no longer in the House. They're gone. They were just voted out of office in 2010 also, later in the year. Obamacare specifically think of it as a group of laws under the aegis umbrella of one law. What it basically wanted to do is promise people more access to health care, higher quality health care. If you had prior conditions, they would be covered. The fees would be lower, and you ultimately have all the health care you would want. Reality speaks another tone, though. In reality, you don't get all the access that you were promised. You don't have all the money the government can throw at your disease, as you will. It was over $2 million they claimed that Obamacare would cover. That's not true at all. It tends to control Obamacare all of the healthcare industry. That means insurance companies, hospitals, doctors. Let me put it in perspective so that people understand.
Sure.
There are 900,000 doctors in this country, and that pool is growing every day. 2/3 of those doctors administer care directly. Others are administrative types, work for insurance companies, are reviewers, or other things that they do. So you're looking at about 700,000 doctors being controlled. There are 5,800 registered hospitals. There are nearly 3 million nurses, almost 1 million auxiliary people, EMTs, which are emergency management people, the people that come in your ambulances, things like that this horrible law wants to control. Also, it wants to control all the infrastructure of freestanding clinics, physicians' offices, pharmaceutical companies, insurance companies, and any other entity that has anything tangentially to do with the medical care in this country. It's an impossibility. It's a law whose algorithm, its basic formula, was set up to fail. Why? They meaning the bureaucracy in Washington, mostly the progressives, let's use that word, want a one-payer system. That is, they want the government to be paying your bills through your taxes, and have the insurance companies administer the payment schedules and fees such as that. Why? Only a mind that's not in this real world can even conceive of such a devastating type of healthcare legislation. But it's here, and we have to deal with it. And so that March 23rd, 2010 onwards, they tried to construct exchanges. Exchanges are where people could go on computer and look at different insurance companies and what they have to offer, and the insurance companies will compete for your business. Well, they had 3.5 years to establish those, and it was a disaster. I believe now there are 16 state exchanges and 1 federal exchange. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but that's what I believe. All of them have had problems, the federal exchange especially. Catherine Sebelius, who's the head of Health and Human Services, had all this dumped in her lap. I'm not a pro-Sebelius person by any stretch of the imagination, but all this, one person had it dumped into her lap, and now she has to administer it, and she failed miserably on the exchanges. Now, if it took 3.5 years to put the exchanges together at $1 billion, imagine them trying to go do phase 2. Phase 2 would be regulating the infrastructure of medical care. That is all the things I mentioned prior. That would take decades to get into place. So Obamacare, in my humble mind, is going to implode because the algorithm, the formula is wrong. It doesn't work. And the government, in any number of ways, is telling us it doesn't work. And how? Through legislation, through edicts that the president has been putting out to modulate Obamacare to make it more palatable to people. So we have a nightmare at our hands. The people deserve better than what's in this bill. As we get through this interview, you'll see that you're not going to get what the government says you're going to get.
When I listen to what you're saying and then my own research, it looks like they're controlling our health, or this is the move to control our health from the cradle to the grave, and then with the IRS backing them with a gun.
Correct. The IRS is the hammer, if you will, for this piece of legislation. The irony it's a great question. The irony itself is many of the references within the Obamacare structure, approximately 2,000 plus pages, refers to section of the IRS codes that weren't enforced at the time. They were not enforced. They brought new sections in to place Obamacare under their auspices. These are non-elected officials that are going to be controlling the financial aspects of Obamacare. The legislation doesn't specifically point out how the IRS interacts. It's the regulatory structure that's coming down the pike from the IRS and Health and Human Services by non-elected officials who are going to affect you day to day. So it's a very good question. The IRS will interact with you in a number of ways. Presently, they cannot lien your house, throw you in jail, take your business away from you. They could send penalties to you, but they have no real enforcement power. That's just a matter of time and just a matter of Obama's pen to write these executive edicts to give them power to do things like that.
Okay, so that was one of my questions, and that might be a misnomer or propaganda that was put out there saying that if you don't pay this Obamacare and you don't buy into it and you don't pay these premiums when this law comes into effect, that the IRS will fine you, and then if you don't pay these fines, of course, you'll end up in jail for evading taxes because now this is a tax and you're violating federal tax law by not paying these taxes and these penalties.
That started with Nancy Pelosi saying that you may even get jail time if you don't buy into the system. But nowhere in the wording that I've read, or the lectures I've heard, the seminars I've heard, anything I've read since the book it was put together, indicates you can go to jail at this point in time for not paying the fines, the penalties, the liens, or whatever. And there are no liens right now that I'm aware of that can happen to you. Now, with that said, Obamacare itself, the legislation, the Patient Affordability Act, has more penalties than healthcare initiatives built into it. So insurance companies could be penalized to the extent of $1 million a day for not following the law as it is written. So can hospitals if they have too many readmissions or they don't bill correctly. So there are a lot of sanctions and penalties built into this monster, if you will. But the IRS is the hammer by which everything is going to come together to hurt people.
And it seems like this is going through phases that I'm listening to you and processing this information, is that the first phase will be to get all the doctors and insurance companies under the hammer. And then once that is said and done and they're happy with that, then will come the next hammer or legislation that will write into those laws that will affect us citizens and those fines coming down.
The first segment was the exchange implementation with all its baggage that it brought. The second stage is the implementation of the regulatory structure to get this monster off the ground. This is a beast that needs to be killed, in my mind. The doctors, by and large, are against it. The AMA, as most people know, are for it. Let me give them some background. AMA covers less than 1/3 of all physicians in this country. The AMA was initially against it. There were some back deals with the Obama administration, and the hierarchy, those people at the top in the AMA went for it, and that's what we have right now. So most physicians are against it. Why? They're not going to get paid. I mean, bottom line is, as many of us want to be humanitarians as possible, you have to pay office expenses, employees, overhead, malpractice insurance, which is way out of sight, which we can go into a little bit later if you'd like.
Sure.
So there's a huge cost involved in practicing medicine. My wife's a dentist, and her overhead is over 65% of her gross money that she takes in. That doesn't leave her with a lot of money. They think all doctors are wealthy. Well, you'll point to a bunch who live on the hill, and they have fancy practices and super specialties. But the majority of us do direct patient, family practice, internal medicine, and basic stuff. And those are the guys who are going to get hit the hardest. And we are being hit very, very hard. I don't practice anymore. I write articles for the media, and I basically as a consultant for the media. We do a lot of media work. But I would tell you, it's a bad deal overall. I believe that the president's ego will not allow him to admit he made a gigantic mistake. And this is what's going forward right now. Even the unions that backed him are complaining about Obamacare, which we could get into if you'd like.
Sure. Would you think that Obama is just the scapegoat and I would say the front man for this, for the powers that be behind this, whoever they are?
Yeah. Forgive me for saying this, but It's hard to get away from the politics of this thing, this huge monster. But I would tell you this: I don't think President Obama has the intellectual prowess to put something like this together. He could be the front man, as you said, and that was very well put. But I don't believe he had that ability. I believe that the lawyers, a huge battalion of lawyers, put this thing together because it's written in legalese from end to end. There was some physician input. One person in particular that irks me is Ezekiel Emanuel. That name may be familiar to you. Ron Emanuel, the mayor of Chicago, former congressman who worked for Obama, is his brother. He was on a number of interviews that I heard, and he was very nasty. And I was throwing some popcorn at the screen when I heard what he had to say. Anyway, he was on some radio shows, some national shows, and he was saying that we need millions of young people, 20, 25, 30, to buy into the system, to make the system palatable, affordable for the people at the other end, the geriatric end, the 65 and above group or 60s and above group. So what it looks like, what he said, it's a great Ponzi scheme. My analysis after writing the book, this is a great Ponzi scheme. People remember Madoff with tens of billions of dollars. This makes that look like zero compared to what's going on now. This is a huge Ponzi scheme. It steals money from the Medicare fund, which we pay a direct tax to. Everyone, when I write a paycheck for somebody, or you get it in your paycheck, or if you have business, you match your employees' contribution. So we're paying a tax for that Medicare. But that Medicare money is disappearing from the people that need it the most. Who really needs health care? Let's get to it. Young kids, they need a lot of health care, and the elderly. Those are the people that really get the most of the health care, and they should have it. People that have worked 30, 40, 50 years are going to be denied the health care that they need. There's no death panels in this thing. There may have been prior to its incipience in March of 2010, but there is ways of withholding medical care from the population that needs it most. And we can go down that road if you'd like.
Oh, I'd love to, because that's one of the things that are circulating on the internet in regards to Obamacare, and I don't know if it's propaganda or what, but that there is a death panel, and that this is really, in a nutshell, a form of population control, like I said, from birth to death, and that they'll have that right at some time, whether it's written in now or later, to decide whether you live or die or you get care or not.
It sounds like Soylent Green. You remember the movie Soylent Green?
Yeah.
Charlton Heston, with G. Robinson. It sounds like something like that. And it is not intrinsically written into the language of the bill. But what they can do is withhold care. How? A number of studies emanated in the last 3 or 4 years trying to reduce the access to certain types of care. Like we guys, after our 40s, our prostates grow generally. It's for all men. We use a test called the prostate-specific antigen. You may be familiar with it, PSA.
Yeah.
This detects cancers, but there are false positives, false negatives. I mean, it may be positive in the test, but you may not have the cancer, and vice versa. They're trying to limit the usage of that. They're saying it's a bad test, which is not a bad test. We use it. That's all we have right now to detect these kind of cancers. Secondly, hip replacements, they say we're doing too many of them. I don't think we're doing enough of them. Many elderly, many people in their 50s and above are hurting, and they need hip replacements, and they're not getting them as frequently as they should. But the government says there are being too many cataract surgeries now they're complaining about. In the last 2 to 3 weeks, 2 studies came out, one on hypertension, saying we're over-treating the elderly or people over 60 for hypertension, and we need to modulate that. And then there's a whole litany in the legal and medical journals about this aspect of trying to reduce access to care by these phony tests that they say we're using, or the cholesterol tests. We're doing too many cholesterol tests. We're giving too many cholesterol drugs to people over 60. So the essence of it is, to get to the point, we're giving too much pharmacology, too many diagnostics, too many things people may not need closer to the end of their existence. If you're 75 but you're completely viable, you're out playing tennis and you have high cholesterol, why treat it when you're statistically only going to live another 3 years? So they're using a concept called biological value, which is not written in there, but it's implied that as you get older, you contribute less to society in general. We both know that's phony, but that's what it is. So they're using that concept. Why should you get more health care if you're contributing less? So there's some sense around that in the theory, but in actuality, it doesn't work out. It's a big lie, as you may have mentioned earlier.
Again, we had mentioned propaganda in the beginning of the podcast. I've studied healthcare and population control back into the Greek societies, and some of the policies they had then we would consider very draconian. At age 60, you had to be poisoned to death, and then they also instituted laws to their warriors where you couldn't take a female lover. You had to take a boy or a man as your lover to control population. So when I look at everything, it's just more population controls that are dressed and a little more humane, but still draconian. And it seems like we're going to be paying for a healthcare system when there's really no healthcare involved.
Well, there are two concepts you just mentioned. One is eugenics, population control, and you're definitely correct about that. The other one's pedastry, you have to take a boy or a woman, a girl, in terms of not to procreate. And that. So there's, in this bill, you could look at items in there that say, well, this is a form of population control if you're not getting the health care that you need, and therefore you die. So it's not a death panel, but the rationale is there for doctors to discuss end-of-life issues with them, whatever those issues may be, not to have to be resuscitated. Well, maybe you shouldn't go to a nursing home. Maybe you should go home and live with your daughter, and we'll give you $100 a week from the government to stay there, to save the nursing home cost. So there's many things in the bill that push it towards the edge of a death panel, but it's really not a group of people sitting down. Now, the cover of my book have you seen the cover of my book?
The tombstones.
The tombstones, victims of Obamacare. I wasn't kidding with that. I own and operated healthcare facilities, and when the government comes in, they try to control every aspect of healthcare. I'm a trained doctor. Thanks to people like you who pay taxes, I was able to go to medical school, or I never would have been able to go to medical school to afford it. And let me tell you something. People have a right to control their own health care. This government entity does not let you do that. And if you think you're getting a freebie because you are socioeconomically depressed or you just don't want to work or whatever, you're not. Because the health care is still being controlled. You have to deal with the same system everybody else has to. In other words, if you have a wealthy person like Warren Buffett going through the town and he has a chest pain and he goes to a hospital locally there, he may not be getting the best and brightest doctor anymore. What we have found is second and tertiary students from colleges are being accepted into medical school for these social sensitivities, or it's dumbing down on the medical education, basically, and physicians in general. We are importing a lot of foreign physicians. Many are fine people who have excellent skills, but many do not, and we don't know the types of training they have in general, specifically. And when they do come here, and you could talk to people after this broadcast, sure, you'll see they only take two tests, an English test and a knowledge test, and that knowledge test is like an industry to get these people passed. Then they call them MD. So we really don't know exactly what these people know. And we have nursing colleagues, and I've talked to dozens over the years that felt they knew more than the doctor they were standing next to. And there may be some basis for that. I write a page on the book on that area, because I've seen it myself, having managed in own nursing homes and hospital facilities in general. I work next to people that I couldn't believe their skills.
I've had similar circumstances over my life dealing with healthcare professionals, and then my wife going to get healthcare and actually almost dying or being injured by the same people who we trust. So I could definitely verify that as truth. Is this system that is coming down with Obamacare modeled after any other country that has a similar healthcare system? They couldn't have just thought of this in thin air, or is this something that originated completely here in America?
It's a great question. It's just a really good question.
Thank you.
Well, let's talk about Romney Care first. Romney Care is a concoction that was put together in the Bay State, Massachusetts, under Governor Romney. And I like Governor Romney. I don't want to get this mixed up here, but he never ever had to serve under this monstrosity called Obamacare. It was passed in 2006. He tried to limit it. The Democratic legislature, the progressives, pushed it through up there, and it was instituted January 1st, 2007, after, I believe, he left office. The attempt was, under Obamacare, to get all the people in the state insured one way or another, or at least under the aegis of the healthcare dynamics, if you will. 92% of the state was already covered in some fashion or mode, either by a private and or a public program. By 2010, it covered 4% more, leaving 4% uncovered at that point in time. We don't know exactly how many people are covered at this point. Obamacare is the microclone of what Obamacare looks like, but Obamacare doesn't do half the things. It doesn't cover half the things that the federal program does, but that was one of the basic models for it. There's been a lot of legal fights especially from the conservative side in Massachusetts, but they didn't go anywhere. Basically, the state won almost every case out there. And I write some of the cases in the book for people to review at their leisure about what types of cases were brought. People being forced to buy health insurance when they didn't want it. And this analogy goes down to young people not wanting to come into the system, but they're being forced under the aegis of Obamacare. So that's one of the plans that it was built on. Also, they looked at the Canadian system to some extent, but I don't believe, from my reading and comparison of different systems, like Japanese system with private and public partnership, which works a lot better than this Obamacare stuff, whatever, was one of the plans that they looked at, nor the German system that seems to work really well as well. The British system, the National Health Service there, that's a disaster. Now, you'll have celebrities in England saying it's the greatest thing that ever happened, but if you read the literature, it's not the greatest thing, because they limit the types of pharmaceutical surgeries, procedures, etc., that people can get. And there's some really outrageous cases that I put in the book about the National Health Service, about end of life. They just, and in their case, they actually do end your life. They just don't give you the care that you need, and the references are in the book so you can see it.
If I'm a high-income earner in America or any of these other countries that have similar health care, am I able to avoid that and be stuck in the system, or can I afford the best health care and avoid Obama altogether?
No, you never avoid Obama, because either it controls your insurance company or it controls the hospital and doctors that you use. In a sense, if you keep your traditional insurance, you're opting out of the exchanges, so that's good. You're buying a Cadillac plane if you're a wealthy or a high-income earner, but you're going to be taxed to the end point. There'll be huge taxes on the Cadillac plane. The point was to make it equitable, that everybody would have similar health care. But Obamacare, what they promised doesn't come out in reality. Of course, it's a tiered system. There's a bronze, a silver, a gold, a platinum. There's a tiered system of how much care you will get. So the purpose of the bill was to give equality to health care. In reality, you don't see it. So if you're a high-end earner, it doesn't mean you're going to get the best doctors. You may think you are, but if the system's going to go down the pike the way it's being implemented, you may not get the best doctors. Hospitals may be limiting care to a great point. They may not even know you're a wealthy person. They may just see your insurance card and say, you're going to get this level of care, and go for it. And that may not be even under the Cadillac plan the best care. So you have to look at what you have, where you are. I mean, you have many excellent facilities where you are. So I would say in your location, you probably get very good care. But not across the country, I would say no.
When I look at everything that's happening, you have the Obamacare healthcare initiative coming down, and then at the same time, they're voting to cut back on food stamps and various things. And it seems like this is a recipe for disaster, or this is a recipe for communism. What is your thoughts?
Well, you have to examine what is communism. It was written, Communist Manifesto was written in 1848 by Marx and Engels to give the products and services to the people, an equitable way of dispersing products and services. The government owns everything, but they disperse everything on an equal basis. Here in America, nothing is dispersed on an equal basis. Wealth is concentrated in a small number of people, so that's not giving everybody what communism would expect to have. This bill is not communism. I can tell you that. It's socialism. It tries to equalize to a point equality in medical care, but it doesn't look like communism from any angle that you can examine it. I think it's a disaster for sure. I think it was forced down our throats. It was passed by the slimmest of margins. People don't want it in general, and when they find out about it, especially through shows like yours, they're not going to want it at all. Okay, I would tell you prior to 2010, 85% of the country, approximately, had some access to health care in some manner or form, whether public or private. So there were 15% of the people who needed coverage. Of those 15%, we don't know exactly how many people were covered or not covered. Many people choose not to have insurance. College students don't want it. They don't. Maybe their parents don't have it. There's no way to know. There's people, our buddies from south of the border come in. They may be part of that group. Of course, the government denies that, but I don't think that is the case. So we don't know. That 15%, whoever they were or are at the time, should be covered if the government wants them to be, and they should have dealt with that group, not the majority. Like, say, they would Obamacare. The majority of people were already covered. Yet, they went after the 8% by changing the entire system. So that was, whoever the ignoramuses were that did this, they failed, and they're failing, and this thing is going to implode as we go through this process of discussing this thing.
I cannot get insurance, or it's just too expensive. I have a pre-existing condition that they label as hepatitis C. So
what you could do, I'm not an insurance agent, but you could get a medical savings account for yourself and buy catastrophic health insurance, which would help you in any number of circumstances, and that will be the way to go. And a lot of people have done that. They claim there are 30 million people that have these type of accounts, these medical savings accounts. But again, it's not a cure-all for what they may need down the road. If you have a cancer, it could eat up a couple $1 million of money very easily. I had a brother-in-law die 27 months ago from lung cancer, and they basically short-shifted him at the VA hospital, just gave him some palliative therapy, and shipped him off home to the pet. And I didn't know any of this until I got involved late, but it was too late for me to do anything for him. So there you go. You were abandoned. That's what we call that. The health system abandoned. The very system that's supposed to help you doesn't want you when you're very sick. They want you to go home and hide under a bed and just pass into oblivion, and that's exactly what they're telling you to do.
In the future, how important is it for us to exercise our free will, beginning with our health? So if this eventually gets implemented, this nightmare that you're talking about, and they do this and the hammer does come down, what are the best ideas and tips you can get us to avoid being on the death panel, avoid getting sick when we're older? Do we all need to start eating healthy and start living right? I mean, that's, to me, is the most common sense thing to do.
Yes, the first thing people need to do is control your weight. And I'm the one not to talk about it because I've had trouble with my weight my entire life. I'm 62, healthy as a horse, busted my knee recently from some sports, and have to use a crutch every so often to get better here. The first thing you need to do is control your weight, because weight could cause you to have diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, shorten your lifespan, cause any number of endocrine diseases, higher incidences of cancer and heart disease with people that are heavier. So weight control would be one good thing people can do. With that, in conjunction with that, of course, is a good diet, a good strong diet. I wrote the Millennium Diet, the Practical Guide to Rapid Weight Loss. It's a diet based on what people's observations were when they were dieting using other plans. And we synergized from a dozen different plans what the best components were. We put them into the Millennium Diet. And phenomenally, people lost a lot of weight. Not because I did this, because the patients themselves used it and tested it. And we saw an average of 3 to 5 pounds the first 5 to 6 weeks. Some people lost over 30 pounds in 35 days. But the greater majority lost 10 to 20 pounds a month. And that was great. And that diet works. It's a high-protein, moderate-carb, low-fat diet. So if you don't follow the morning diet, follow a diet that has some kind of regulatory structure in it, that you can have 3 meals a day and a little snack, about 12 to 1,400 calories, and it should be higher on the protein side unless you have kidney disease or liver disease where you can't process protein as well. And check with your doctor if you have any questions. But dieting is important. Exercise. You don't have to go become a long-distance runner to exercise like my 2 daughters are. What you could do, 3 times a week, a good walk if the weather is fine. You can go into a gym 20 minutes, 3 to 4 times a week, doing physical exercise, especially running on a treadmill, elliptical, things like that. You want to do exercises that are going to exercise your heart and your lungs. That's where you're not going to die from bicep failure, you will die from heart failure. So exercise your heart, keep it steady, walk steps, avoid elevators and escalators and stuff if you can. And so exercise, diet, vitamins. There's a whole controversy about vitamins. One just came out recently, a report saying vitamins don't do anything. It's complete nonsense. I wouldn't follow it. A good multivitamin with minerals, and there are many out there, I don't push any specific brand at all, will be good. Antioxidants do work, but they work on a long-term basis. You can't just take them for a week or a month. Vitamins are the same way. You need to take them for a long time to get the proper benefits from it. And longevity will come. We know just from the diet point of view, that a high-protein, restricted calorie diet keeps lab animals alive 50 to 100% longer than their littermates, and they could still procreate, have kids. So there is something to that. We cannot prove that in humans because we live so long. But in the book itself, it embodies some of the studies, the Millennium Diet book, which will be an update down the road. But right now it's quite current. So diet, exercise, eating right, multivitamins, those are the things that you can do. Now, what you shouldn't do is smoke. I'm not talking about marijuana here. I'm talking about nicotine. You should stay away from nicotine. Moderate your alcohol intake if you're doing alcohol at all. Excellent idea. Not tell people to become teetotalers, but they need to reduce the amount of alcohol.
What would you say is moderate? Can someone have a drink or 2 a night, or are you talking just a couple drinks a week?
I'm talking about infrequent use of alcohol.
Okay.
There's no absolute amount. I wish I had a number for you. I don't. It's a really good question. People ask it all the time. I've asked the experts in these fields. They don't know. But I would say if you had an ounce or 2 of wine a night, it's not going to hurt you. If you're going to have a bottle a night, it's going to hurt you. So that dichotomy is we just don't know. Okay. But some people are more sensitive to its effects than others, as you know. I mean, it's common knowledge about that. So now they say alcohol may help you because of the grape type. It may reduce your cholesterol. You can reduce your cholesterol other ways. Resveratrol, which is in grapes, which goes into the wines and stuff, especially in the French, they found that they have lower levels of cholesterol because they drink more wine. Well, you can get that effect without taking the wine if you want that. So you don't have to go that route. But the questions are excellent, but the answers are not always what people want to hear, unfortunately. Now, you want to go towards marijuana. There's a slew of studies on it that it may affect your mind in so many different ways, but also there's a slew of studies that help under medical circumstances as well. So we don't know everything about marijuana yet. I would tell people, if you use it, don't drive. Don't hurt somebody else. Of course, your mentation, you'll get confused and things like that, and you could die initially. There's been enough people who died smoking marijuana, and I'm not anti-marijuana. I'm just anti being people hurt. To many people, it's not though, and they think they're getting away with something. And again, I'm not anti. It was one of those things you did in college, your fraternity, stuff like that. Fine, but we didn't go out and drive cars or race trucks or use heavy machinery, as you say. Yep. But we know the beneficial effects too. So that's people's personal business, and they should be able to use what they want. But use it in moderation, because if it's heavily used, there will be damage to your body. It has to be. There's just too many, just with the alcohol and all the other things that we mentioned. They are toxins in a sense. They're foreign items to the body, and the body can only process so much of this stuff before you start seeing negative results. And we know this. I worked as a young doctor for a detox center. I detoxed so many people from chemicals, celebrities too, by the way. And I will tell you, you never believe some of the stuff these people were taking. It was amazing.
comes down to balance and common sense, just like the diet and the exercise program that you recommend in the Millennium Diet, limiting the calories and the food intake. It goes along the lines of smoking, whatever substance you might be. Of course, hopefully it's not nicotine with all the chemicals in the cigarettes these days, anything other than marijuana. You just got to limit it and balance it, and anything you overdo, it's always going to have an adverse effect onto your body.
Correct, absolutely. And that is the best advice anybody can give, I'd imagine. And you don't need to be a physician to know that stuff. And even the physicians down here, I'm in Maryland right now. I'm a native of New York. But anyway, they abuse themselves by doing certain chemicals. So I've seen it. So, you're right on. I mean, right.
Great. You've given us a lot of great information today, Dr. Mark Davis, and what I'd like to do is direct people to your book if they're interested in purchasing it and finding more about Obamacare, because I'm sure there's a lot more in there that we didn't discuss and we can't within an hour, 45 minutes of time.
Yeah, Obamacare, Dead on Arrival, A Prescription for Disasters, Amazon. All books are on Amazon. If people buy it from Amazon, please put your opinion up there. Please let them know how you feel about Obamacare and the book in general. It can be gotten from a place called CreateSpace, Books A Millions, Barnes & Noble, either their online site or in the store. And if the stores don't have it, please order it. Have them order it for you. It's on Nook, Kindle. It's on the Chrome from Google as well. It's on PBS. Or any book site should be able to get it for you because it's a national book. It's appreciate being on your show. It's been an excellent.
I appreciate you, Dr. Mark Davis. I know you're a busy man with the book, and then you're doing a lot of interviews across the country, so I appreciate your time. It takes a good man who's a doctor to step away from his medical practice and educate people there on the truth of the medical industry and what's coming down. You're a great man. It's great to have you on the show, and I wish you the best of luck in life.
I thank God. I wish you also well, with all your endeavors, because you're a great guy for having me on. I really appreciate it.
All right, take care.
You take care, too. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Get your website now for only $79 at WeCreateWebDesigns.com, or get a logo for your brand at WeCreateWebDesigns.com. Mo made $1 million with his website, so get yours and visit WeCreateWebDesigns.com. They're the experts you need, and they're waiting for you at WeCreateWebDesigns.com.